Thank you, Arnold, for joining me. I've really been following Bright Garden Voices since it started live broadcasting, I think, on the 24th of January. For those of you out there who don't know it, it's kind of like a platform using Zoom to connect Armenians and Azerbaijanis together to engage in some very refreshing and important discussions. It's exceeded my expectations, Arnold, and each episode exceeds the expectations that I had after listening to the one before. So perhaps you could explain to everyone, why did you start it?
Thank you for having me on, Nick. First of all, a big shout out to you on behalf of Bright Garden Voices for being one of our biggest supporters from the beginning. As you said, you've always been excited about the initiative from the very get go. You've helped spread the word about each episode, and I believe you've even made some really good summaries and reflections on each meeting. So, thank you for that. So, as we all know, there was this brutal war. Now we call it the Second Nagorno Karabakh War, where a lot of violence, a lot of very horrible things happened, and the same brutality in some ways had spilled over various kinds of platforms, including social media. And so this was, in many ways, the first time many Armenians and Azerbaijanis were having sort of conversations or exchanges with each other. And for the most part, it was actually quite hostile. There was a lot of enmity, and this continued for a few months. And in many ways, I think it's still continuing. However, there was always a small group, and it looks like a growing group of users, especially on Twitter and other platforms also, where sort of people from both sides want to have actually respectful and meaningful exchanges with each other. And I believe, sort of, after the war, I sort of became part of this group. And I have to be honest, I mean, myself, I was not involved really on social media too much, especially on Twitter. And I was mostly on Facebook. Yeah, so it was just after the war that I sort of became more familiar with these people. And among these very same people were Diego and Aidan. So the two other individuals with whom I started Bright Garden Voices, and it was actually Diego who sort of reached out to me and Aidan, I believe, and it took less than a week to create this platform. And this is, I believe, it was not just us three that had thought about this. A lot of people, I think, had this in the back of their minds. But the idea is to create this platform where this sort of healthy dialogue, meaningful exchanges could take place without the interruption of trolls or angry sort of or abusive comments which we always get, which they always interrupt these conversations. So we thought about creating this platform where it could be safe for people to come and express themselves and for others to see this as examples and for maybe for this sort of to grow. So we decided that perhaps Zoom was a perfect platform to do this on, because one of the things we tried to achieve is sort of to have people see each other's faces. That's a big part of it. We are so used to interacting with sort of these people we don't know about, and it just makes it so much easier to be hateful and abusive, and it sort of makes you connect better with people when you're able to see them face to face. So we thought Zoom, having people come on Zoom and discussing with each other, holding a dialogue, would be very beneficial in this respect. And the goal is in itself just to have meaningful dialogue. I mean, we don't have this agenda to sort of come to these conclusions to agree on. We can agree to disagree, uh, but of course, the three of us and most of the people sort of involved in this program, of course, they want to hear peaceful narratives. So yes, it's just to sort of bring people together, and sort of talk to each other. And I would say, and I believe this also goes for Diego and Aidan and the people who follow us, is that I saw a lot of dehumanization and sort of the results of 3 decades of dehumanization on both sides, uh, because of the lack of interaction and because of all this enmity that had been there. And this manifested itself in various ways, in the battlefield and across all platforms of interaction. And so I would say that a personal agenda of mine is to help rehumanize both sides. And if this program sort of helps to move us into that direction, then I'm very much happy with that. And I would also have to add that this is a very, in many ways, a small window it could be. So the war is still very, very fresh. It has just ended. So people are interested on the topic. And because of the pandemic, we have become more tech friendly. More people know how to use Zoom. More people are at home and interact, online. So I think when all these factors come together, I think it makes sense that such an initiative took the shape that it has taken.
It's a very interesting point you made about being able to see faces, because I do remember every time I log into your meetings and I can't see all the names or I see a nickname and I'm actually looking at new faces and thinking, I wonder if he or she is from Armenia or Armenian or Azerbaijani. And of course, you can't tell. So I think that's another dynamic to it. And I think very much you've succeeded in what you're trying to achieve. And it's very interesting for me even to see the name of the project. You know, Nagorno Karabakh is Black Garden, but you're called Bright Garden, which I guess that was intentional. I mean, how could it not be? What has been the general reaction to the initiatives from people, do you think, online?
Well, the reactions, yes, I mean, that's been perhaps one of the challenges, but of course, totally expected. I mean, we were always expecting some sort of criticism and sort of anger about the initiative, maybe, especially on both sides, but especially, I would say, from the Armenian side, who sort of have suffered great losses and because of the unfavorable outcome of the war and all the things that accompanied the war also. And most of the worst of our reactions were actually right at the announcement of the initiative. So we suddenly received all these messages, some criticism about, why are these people trying to talk to each other? It's so improper, and there were some angry voices. But the interesting thing is that after we released our first and second episodes, uh, a lot of these voices sort of went away, and actually a few of the people who had actually criticized us, they actually reached out to us and told us that they have changed their minds about the program and that they think we're actually doing something good and beneficial. So I think that was a very great development there. And I also have to say that something we weren't expecting was actually the amount of support we received. Of course, we have very grassroots sort of movement initiative, and we already had this very good sort of social media family. We had this small group of support, but then suddenly we heard we had sort of academics and all these people contact us and telling us that this is a great idea and that we should move forward with it. And that just gave us all the encouragement and confidence we needed to move forward with it. And of course, there's still people who are not happy with the initiative, but I think more and more we see more people come to realize that holding a dialogue doesn't really do any harm. I mean, it's a way of people interacting with each other, and you're not really giving anything away. It just, I'm happy to say that. Yes.
So it's interesting for me that you used the word grassroots. This has always been my criticism of many peace building projects on Nagorno Karabakh in the past, probably for maybe even a decade, that they were concentrated on very large NGOs that received lots of funding, I mean, significant amounts of funding that would shock many people. And then when the conflict started, all of those NGOs, most of them anyway, just went silent. I've always believed in the power of grassroots. I've always believed in local networks amplifying messages. So this has been very encouraging for me to see. I remember either during the war or just after an interview with Avaz Hassanov, who's an Azerbaijani activist who's worked on a number of peace building projects. And he said in the early 90s, when the war stopped, it took 3 years for the Azerbaijani civil society side to reach out and connect with their Armenian equivalents to engage in dialogue. He said he reckoned perhaps this time, because of the internet, it would only take a year. But you guys seem to have beaten that prediction. It was very, very quick, starting in January. Um, I just wondered, how do you come up with the themes, and how do you come up with the guests you invite?
Right. Let me actually, if you don't mind, I want to just make a comment about what you said about grassroots. I think it was very, in many ways, organic for this sort of initiative to take shape because of us interacting with each other on social media, and that's it was sort of always destined to happen, and sort of in this environment. And yes, so we had this, of course, as I mentioned before, this family, especially on Twitter, that we always wanted to sort of, it showed that we wanted to talk to each other. And one of the interesting things I would also say about social media is that when you actually constantly interact with someone, especially respectfully, then you tend to be more sort of willing to sort of be reserved into what you post, especially if it's in many ways harmful or offensive to the other side. So I think this is one of the perhaps good things that could also come out of social media. And I know that many people met each other during the war and now are actually sort of exchanging more sort of better words with each other. They're just being respectful to each other. Some people who blocked each other are not talking to each other again. And you mentioned about sort of these major NGOs receiving all these fundings, and I want to point out that we actually need absolutely no funding for this program because of the platform, because of Zoom, because everyone became more familiar with Zoom during the pandemic, and I think that's a very important sort of thing to point out.
And then, yeah, just about, I mean, how do you come up with a theme, and how do you come up with who you're going to invite to present?
So we make this list of potential guests we would like to have on. So we sort of list them, we look at them, and we try to think about how we could pair them, or who has something interesting to contribute, who has something that we could pair with someone else for a really good discussion. And of course, some of the themes, it's inevitable that we will cover. Of course, we had one about dialogue with Umid and Harair. So we know Umid, he's sort of very respectful and constructive with the way he sort of interacts with people. He's from our first episode, and Harair, the same thing. So we thought, why not make this a good first episode to set the tone for the rest? Um, then, because we knew RP and Orhan, and because of their sort of support for us and their involvement, we thought, why not make an episode about the power of film, photography, visuals in general, in sort of forming, constructing our conceptions about the conflict and what role they can play. And of course, identity was a topic that we would, I think, inevitably would have to discuss because it's so much a part of the interactions between Armenians and Azerbaijanis, and it's hotly disputed. Part of sort of all these disputes on history and sort of who we are, who the other person is, and how our identities are shaped by identifying ourselves versus the other. And so, yeah, we look at potential people, what they can contribute, and of course we have these larger themes that we always think we should cover. And when there is a correlation, of course, we think that would make a good episode.
Yeah, great. And I was particularly happy to see that you covered visuals, images, photographs, film. These are also often overlooked, and actually, culture does actually can play a role in nationalism, for example. And yet, there have been no attempts to look at how it can work the other way. So I think that these have been really productive discussions. Music is another interest of mine, and how that can be used to develop closer bonds, for example. You mentioned that Zoom is free and all of this, but one thing I remember you saying was how much work it takes to actually set up. I mean, yeah, Zoom is free, but it's still a lot of time that you guys have to spend on this. It seems.
Oh yes, oh yes. It's very time consuming, sometimes challenging. So trying to find sort of people able to sort of be on the program, willing to adjusting the times, sort of making sure everything goes smoothly. On the technical side, of course, we have to remember that all our guests are we are almost always on different continents. If none of our guests are, even if our guests are on the same continent, the three organizers, Diego, Aidan, and myself, we are all on three different continents and different time zones. Our guests are on different time zones. When we're trying to communicate with each other, when we're trying to sort of hold a meeting, so there is a lot of factors we have to keep in mind, and the way we discuss the content. So yeah, sometimes there are headaches, sometimes there are challenges, but we're just so enthusiastic about it, and Aidan, Diego, and I, we always get very actually excited when we're discussing the next meeting. Sometimes we have sort of arguments about which images we should use on the flyer, which is interesting. But yeah, there is a lot of work that goes behind the scene, and I want to thank Diego and Aidan. And actually, we also have a group of people, great people, who have sort of voiced their support. They said that they want to help us with various aspects, if there is anything to help with translations, with technical things. So yeah, and that makes our work a lot more meaningful and a lot more sort of achievable.
Yeah, well, one, I was actually, when we were trying to arrange this, and the fact that, you're in the US and I'm in Tbilisi, it did occur to me that, wow, they have to actually coordinate times, and then I guess you have to think about what is the right time for an audience to join us. Of course, it goes onto YouTube later. So that only occurred to me today. And I have to say, I'm also impressed with the graphic design for the flyers. I think sometimes people don't think how important presentation is as well in order to attract viewers or listeners, or however you want to call them. So, yeah, really all round, it's been a very refreshing and encouraging project to witness. And I'm glad you mentioned that some people are offering to help you, because I wanted to follow up what you said with, if someone does want to help you, how can they help you?
Oh, absolutely. Please reach out to us. Well, we're mostly a Twitter platform. I mean, the page is mostly active on Twitter, but please reach us there or on Facebook, or our email, brightgardenvoices@gmail.com. Please just let us know, and it is very, very much appreciated. Any way you think it could be useful, helpful to us, anything from translations to technical things to anything else. And of course, we want to grow. And we want actually an organic growth of people who are really interested, and to grow sort of very organically and expand our audience in that direction. And I also have to mention that most of the credit for the flyer design goes to Aidan.
She's doing a great job. Um, to end, I'd just like to give you the opportunity to say anything that you might want to say that hasn't been covered here, or that you feel a pressing need to say now.
Well, I would just say that I think dialogue is just important to be had. I mean, it doesn't mean everything is sort of rainbows and happy. It's not. It's more necessary during times of conflict, during sort of these sort of times, difficult times. And I think ordinary people hearing each other is vital. Ordinary voices have to be heard. They don't have to agree with each other, but it paves the way towards understanding, and it benefits everyone. And that is something I strongly believe in it, and that is why I am involved with this program, even though I haven't been involved in anything to do with Armenia and Azerbaijan before. This war made me realize that, and yeah, and that's just something I want to share.
Okay, so thank you. I look forward to the next Bright Garden Voices, and I wish you all the best with future episodes. They've really, and I mean this most genuinely, really been very encouraging and refreshing.
Thank you, Nick. Thank you very much, and thank you for your continued support.